After the CIA strike that killed al-Qaeda's leader in Kabul, we're getting our first look at the safe house balcony where an unmanned U.S. drone with 2 Hellfire missiles killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri. The killing in some ways validating the president's argument that the U.S. can track down terrorists without having thousands of troops on the ground. But it also raises new questions about how the world's most wanted terrorist could have lived for months in a safe house owned by the Taliban's Interior Ministry. The minister, part of the government, a leader of the infamous Haqqani terror network rooted in neighboring Pakistan, in the middle, no less, in the middle of downtown Kabul near the presidential palace. Joining us now, Leon Panetta, former Secretary of Defense and CIA Director during the Obama administration, former White House Chief of Staff, of course, to President Clinton. And, of course, you were a critical player at CIA with the takedown of Osama bin Laden. So now the number 2, Zawahiri, his heir, successor, has been taken out. First of all, your reactions to the hit and the fact that, as far as we know, there was no civilian deaths. His family was able to escape. The house was not blown up, which is pretty astonishing.
Well, again, I pay tremendous tribute to our intelligence forces, our military forces that were involved. The CIA. I think there's a tremendous amount, from my own experience, a tremendous amount of planning involved in those kinds of attacks. The ability to do constant reconnaissance, to gather intelligence, to know that you have the right target, and to be able to hit that target without any kind of collateral damage, I think is a tribute to their capabilities. And in the end, I think it does complete a very important mission that we began on 9/11. Which was to make sure we would go after those who were involved in the attack on 9/11. We have gone after successfully bin Laden, and now we've gotten Zawahiri. And those were the 2 key planners of the 9/11 attack. So it really does send a message to the world that you don't attack the United States and get away with it.
And as well, you know, the terrible murders of hundreds of people in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, the USS Cole, 17 service members in 2000. So there's so much death and destruction from this one person. Are you concerned, though, that terrorists are now going to be able to use Afghanistan as a safe haven because the Taliban have clearly not lived up to their agreement in Doha not to harbor terrorists after the U.S. withdrawal?
Well, another mission that came out of 9/11 was that we were going to make sure that Afghanistan would never again be taken over by the Taliban and become a safe haven for terrorism. Unfortunately, that has happened. The Taliban is now in charge of Afghanistan. There's no question that they're providing a safe haven for terrorists. The Haqqanis who are involved with the Taliban are terrorists themselves. And the fact that Zawahiri, one of the top leaders of al-Qaeda, could simply walk into Kabul, get an apartment in the middle of the capital, not have anybody raise any questions, sends a real signal that the Taliban is going to continue to provide a safe haven for terrorism, and the United States has a real responsibility to continue to be able to determine whether or not there are going to be threats against the United States or our allies emanating from Afghanistan.
What are the implications for Pakistan? Because the Haqqani network is rooted there, and apparently they helped bring him from Pakistan into Afghanistan, where he could communicate more readily and start sending videos out to his supporters, advocating to kill more Americans.
Well, when Haqqani got appointed to be one of the leaders in the Taliban government, that was a real signal that the Taliban was going to embrace terrorism. And at the same time, it represented the kind of terrorism that often came out of Pakistan. That was always a concern because they found safe haven in Pakistan and could conduct attacks into Afghanistan. So this is not a good step forward, and it represents the fact that terrorism really continues to remain a major flashpoint in a very dangerous world. Terrorism has metastasized in many ways It's ISIS, it's Boko Haram, it's Al-Shabaab in North Africa, and it continues to be Al-Qaeda. So we are facing and continue to face a real threat of a terrorist attack, either on the United States or elsewhere. That's one of the major flashpoints that we have to confront.
And as the former defense secretary, I want to ask you about new information from a Freedom of Information suit that text messages received and sent by the top Pentagon officials, the acting Secretary of Defense, who were very deeply involved in the response on January 6th, have been wiped out from their government-issued phone. The watchdog group American Oversight has now asked the Attorney General to investigate the Pentagon's failure to preserve these communications. Weren't these officials responsible for the Official Records Act, for keeping any records of their critical decision-making and their calls during those days?
Andrea, this is another major concern that obviously officials out of the Trump administration were taking steps to make sure that potential evidence involved in January 6th would not be there. I really do think that the Justice Department has to investigate the loss of this kind of critical evidence. There's no question that this wasn't done in a manner that just kind of was bureaucracy doing what bureaucracies do. This was a deliberate effort to make sure that very important evidence regarding what the players were doing at the Pentagon, at the Secret Service, and elsewhere were saying and doing on January 6th, all of which is very relevant to the investigation as to what happened.
You're saying this was a cover-up?
I don't think there's any question that when you go from agency to agency and find out that key messages have been deleted, something's going on here that resembles very clearly a conspiracy.
Leon Panetta, thank you very much. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.